I thought instead of going immediately back to the Lamrim prayer, to talk a little bit about some of the teachings that I had just received. Of course, just a little bit, because there was quite a bit. So we were studying a text by Gyaltsab Je, who is one of Lama Tsongkhapa's chief disciples, and it's a commentary on Asanga's text, which was a commentary on Maitreya's text called Sublime Continuum, or Uttara Tantra, which was a treatise that was about, that gleaned from different sutras about the Buddha nature. Okay, so it's a treatise about the Buddha nature. That was the principal topic, covered many, many other topics as well, but always in conjunction to how they related to the Buddha nature, to the aspects of our present state of being that can be transformed into the truth body, the Dharmakaya of a Buddha. So I'll talk in the upcoming days a little bit more about what that is. But the text talked a lot about the factors that we need to develop to ripen our, this Buddha nature, to make it transform, to purify it. And the first factor was called faith or conviction in the Mahayana teachings. And then it also talked about having wisdom and concentration and compassion, which are, kind of naturals. You would assume that they would be in there. But this one of the faith in the Mahayana teachings came first, and it kept coming up again and again and again in the text as we went through, because Maitreya had talked about different people who have different kind of hindrances to actualizing their Buddha nature. And one of the grossest, biggest hindrances is this lack of conviction or faith or interest in the path, in liberation, in enlightenment. And it was put here, all those things together in, lack of faith or devotion to the Mahayana. And the reason the Mahayana is stressed so much is because it's the Mahayana path that leads us to full enlightenment. If we don't, there's other paths that will lead us to arhatship, but this text is really focused on full enlightenment, become a Buddha, don't stop short at arhatship. And so thinking again and again, well, how do you develop faith in the Mahayana teachings? And do we consciously take that upon ourselves as something to do? Or do we just kind of leave this matter of faith or confidence or conviction kind of by the wayside and think, well, if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't, But I'm going to focus on, love, compassion, and wisdom. Yeah. So, really was making me think about, this kind of conviction as something specifically to put our energy into developing while we're practicing. Because without it, we're never going to even develop love, compassion, and concentration and wisdom, because we're not going to have the interest in doing so. So often they talk in the teachings about faith or confidence or trust as being something very important at the beginning of the path. And to me, I've always had difficulty with the word faith, because my mind immediately goes to blind faith, which is what I don't want to have and what I got fed up with, when I was young. But here we're not talking about blind faith. We're talking about, learning the path, learning the Buddhist perspective, checking it out, and if it makes sense, having a kind of faith that is convictional faith or convinced faith that comes from using our intelligence to examine something. Yeah, but it's not just a thing of intellectually examining, because we examine, it makes sense, and then it awakes this quality of faith or conviction, which is a much more emotional quality. You know, it's not emotional like blind faith, but it's something that like really makes the mind feel quite inspired, quite interested, quite eager to learn. Yeah, and so it's a mind that overcomes a lot of the shoulds. You know, when we tell ourselves, well, I should study this, but, you know, or I should do this. But this kind of faith is one that overcomes that kind of shoulds, because it has this attraction and inspiration and aspiration and conviction kind of all bundled together. But really thinking of it as a quality that we should conscientiously try to develop, you know, by seeing how it's so important. Yeah, because if we don't have this interest or this faith, you know, and you can see it very easily with a lot of our old friends and a lot of the people we know and family members who don't have any interest, any faith. You know, they may have the possibility to learn something about the Dharma or about liberation, but just no interest at all. You know, their minds are completely absorbed in, you know, the 8 worldly concerns and in the happiness of this life. So when you see that, then you can understand how, you know, devotion to the Mahayana, or faith in the Mahayana, is so important for just getting us to Dharma class, getting us on the cushion, getting us to the retreat hall. And so to put some energy into cultivating that. Yeah, not by blind faith, but by really understanding the teachings and thereby having this conviction and trust in them. Okay? But think a little bit about how, you know, kind of devotion to the Mahayana plays a role in your practice. You know, think about that. Kind of, you know, do I have much? What is it, you know? And do I have much? What role does it play in my practice? Or maybe it doesn't have any role, because maybe we've never even thought about it. You know, we have some devotion, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But wait, maybe we've never thought about developing it and the importance of doing that and how you do it.